ICE and Border Patrol agents are being ambushed in growing numbers, and the mainstream media is barely covering it. Meanwhile, just across the border in Mexico, Americans are reportedly being targeted and even deported by Mexican officials under questionable circumstances. In this video, we break down what's happening at the border, why these attacks are increasing, and how this chaos could spiral if left unchecked. If you're tired of selective reporting and want raw, honest breakdowns from a center-right lens, hit that subscribe button now. Over the last few weeks, there have been multiple targeted attacks on ICE and CBP officers. These aren't isolated incidents. They're organized ambushes happening primarily near the southern border in states like Texas, Arizona, and California. In one recent case, border agents were lured into a remote area with fake distress calls. Once on the scene, they were met with automatic gunfire from across the Mexican side of the border. Miraculously, no agents were killed, but several were injured. Local sheriffs are calling this an act of war. And it's not just cartels anymore. Gangs operating out of sanctuary cities are believed to be coordinating with cross-border criminal networks, emboldened by years of weak enforcement and political posturing.
Federal authorities provided new details about an ambush attack on officers at an immigration detention facility in North Texas. A police officer was shot in the neck outside the detention center in Alvarado Friday. Fox 4's Amelia Jones in studio with the latest tonight. Amelia.
Clarice, the Alvarado police officer who was shot is expected to recover. The Department of Justice says this marks the fifth assault on law enforcement officers in the northern Texas district this year. Nearly a dozen people are now facing multiple federal charges.
Make no mistake, this was not a so-called peaceful protest. It was indeed an ambush.
Monday, the Department of Justice shared new details on a shooting at the Prairieland Detention Center in Alvarado, south of Fort Worth. Officials say around 10:30 p.m. on July 4th, a group of 10 to 12 people dressed in black military-style clothing shot off fireworks and vandalized the facility.
They engaged in the graffiti, they damaged vehicles and a guard structure. The graffiti had such words as traitor, ice pig, other profanity.
Officials say this was a ruse to draw out the ICE personnel, and it worked. Two unarmed corrections officers went to speak with the vandals. Meanwhile, the group signaled a gunman nearby. Alvarado police responded to a 911 call at the facility. When the officer got there, he was shot in the neck, and another assailant fired 20 to 30 rounds at the unarmed corrections officers. When the suspects fled the scene, the Johnson County Sheriff's Office stopped a vehicle leaving the detention center.
There was a single driver in that vehicle. The sheriff deputy saw in plain sight a firearm. Another firearm was in the back seat. And there were two Kevlar ballistic-style vests also in that vehicle.
According to court documents, this driver told the sheriff deputy he met some people online and took them from Dallas to the detention center to, quote, make some noise.
And then there's the messaging that's coming from top Democrats. Watch how they demonize our own agents that are just doing their jobs.
Every single ICE agent who's engaged in this aggressive overreach, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, will of course be identified. This is not the 1930s.
Secret police who are masked, who are intimidating, who are scaring people. These Gestapo-like tactics.
This is Gestapo-like behavior.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets.
When you compare the old films of the Gestapo grabbing people off the streets of Poland, it does look like a Gestapo operation.
You posted on social media that, quote, ICE is acting like a terrorist force.
ICE agents, they are coming and kidnapping and disappearing people on the streets of the United States.
But this terror campaign of having masked people rolling up in vans, but we also have to talk about the agents themselves that are carrying this out. If you have any decency, quit now. Because just doing what you were told has been the justification for some of the worst horrors and crimes against humanity.
Masked agents of the state in unmarked vehicles are terrorizing communities. They are disappearing people.
One has to assume they're hiding something or they're hiding misbehavior, because otherwise why would they be wearing masks and denying their identities?
If everything is legitimate and proper, why are you wearing masks to hide your face?
I mean, not only was this bill obviously horrific for healthcare, for all the wealth that's being transferred, of course, to billionaires in this country, but a lot of folks don't realize that in this bill, you are supercharging this agency. Donald Trump is essentially creating a new super federal law enforcement agency through ICE. It's larger now, like you said, than the FBI. In fact, you could take all of the federal law enforcement agencies and combine them, and ICE is now going to be larger than all of those combined.
I mean, budget-wise or budget-wise?
Yeah, well, and personnel. We're going
At
to
some point, we will get more personnel, 10,000, I think, over the next 5 years.
We're going to double the size of ICE. And what's really, I think, scary about this moment is we know that most of the people that are being detained right now by ICE have no criminal record, have been convicted of absolutely nothing. It's U.S. citizens, it's protesters with doing their First Amendment rights, it's parents, it's families, it's grandparents. I just heard a story of a young man coming out of church back home in California, arrested, coming out of church, no criminal history, sent to a foreign country. These are the kinds of things that are happening. And people need to understand that Donald Trump, this is not just about immigration. Donald Trump is obsessed with creating his own personal federal police force, and that's what he's doing here.
And to make matters worse, mayors like LA Mayor Karen Bass are doing more for illegal immigrants than U.S. citizens. Watch as she personally visits an ICE operation, something that she forgot to do with the Palisades wildfires as she was too busy partying in another country.
So I am going to say,
Mayor Bass, I need to get my phone and we're departing.
Okay. All right. Mayor Bass.
Mayor Bass.
Any
comment, Mayor Bass?
Thank you.
Mayor Bass, any comment?
Yes, my comment is they need to leave, and they need to leave right now. They need to leave because this is unacceptable.
Mainstream media is also doing its part by highlighting an app that pinpoints where ICE agents are, which could have been used in the attacks against them.
Because when I saw what was happening in this country, after reading Project 2025, after watching Trump's first administration, and certainly hearing his campaign rhetoric on the trail for the second, I had to do something to fight back. And, you know, being raised in a Jewish household and growing up in that community, I had the opportunity to meet Holocaust survivors and learn all about the history of Nazi Germany and Hitler's rise to power. And when we see 5-year-olds in courtrooms without representation, when we see college students being disappeared for their political beliefs, and, you know, even worse, when we see babies being ripped from their mother's arms while they're screaming for their children in the name of patriotism and this country, I really think we're watching history repeat itself. And, you know, ICE Block was about the best way I could think of to fight back.
So, but on that note, I'm wondering, you know, does the app encourage anyone to do anything illegal?
Absolutely not. Our whole thing is inform, not obstruct. In fact, multiple times throughout the app, it says for informational purposes only. At no time are we encouraging violence. At no time are we encouraging any kind of interference with law enforcement. The idea of this is if you get a notification and you're walking down the street and it says, hey, ICE has been reported 4 blocks ahead of you, we encourage our users to turn left, turn around, keep yourself and your family safe, and avoid confrontation in the first place.
Florida czar Tom Homan was recently on air, and this is what he had to say about these senseless attacks on federal agents.
Fired the shots and were later arrested. Who were they, Tom?
Look, they're your typical protesters that go from protesters to criminals. The attack on ICE officers, you've covered it many times, is up nearly 700% now. We were talking 500% a couple weeks ago, so it continues. The rhetoric against the men and women of ICE is skyrocketing, especially by members of Congress. We have senators, we have Congress people that compare ICE to the Nazis, compare ICE to racists, and it just continues. So the public thinks, well, if a member of Congress can attack ICE, why can't we? So the rhetoric has to stop.
While our agents are under attack at the border, Americans traveling in Mexico are reporting harassment and in some cases being deported without clear cause. Videos and testimonies have surfaced online showing U.S. citizens being pulled over by Mexican authorities, asked for paperwork, and then forcibly removed or denied re-entry into the country. Though unverified in some cases, the trend is sparking serious concerns about diplomatic breakdowns and retaliation policies. Some believe this could be Mexico's quiet response to a mounting U.S. scrutiny and tensions, while others see it as a local corruption and power flexing in areas controlled by cartels. Either way, Americans are increasingly unsafe on both sides of the border. So why now? Why are ICE and CBP under fire, and why are Americans being targeted across the border? The border crisis has escalated under years of open border policies and political neglect. Although President Trump returned to office promising to restore order, many of the effects of the last administration's rollback of enforcement measures are still being felt. From the past ending of policies like Remain in Mexico, to restriction on ICE's ability to detain and deport illegal immigrants with criminal records, the message for years was clear. The U.S. border was wide open. Critics argue that the damage done during the previous 4 years of lax enforcement still lingers, and border towns continue to suffer. There's rising pressure to overhaul immigration laws, close loopholes, and give law enforcement the tools that they need. The results? Officers in the field are starting to see support again, but they're still dealing with the fallout from years of being vilified and defunded, and Americans traveling to Mexico are now facing the consequences of that instability. We can't afford to ignore this. Attacks on ICE and CBP aren't just a border issue, they're a national security issue. And now with Americans being pushed around abroad, the stakes just got even higher. It's time to double down on enforcement, restore respect for our border agents, and ensure that America is never caught off guard again. If you want more updates like this, subscribe to the Civic Trigger. We post daily videos cutting through the spin with clear, unapologetic coverage. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Should states have more control over immigration enforcement, or will the federal government finally lead with strength? Thanks for watching. Stay sharp, stay informed, and stay free.